Going to be eating a shock dart, but he's able to makes it
win anything. Sam, defend your team because they haven't won.
Strap yourselves in. It's another 1 hour episode.
Oh yeah.
Spike defused.
Welcome to Press Forward to Defuse, your weekly spot for Valorant esports news and discussion. If you're here for challengers, you're a day too early. That's going to be tomorrow. Sorry to disappoint you. But we will be talking about it a lot today, so you can get your nice preview as we get into the week's action. I'm Darth Mike, joined by our usual hosts. We've got Ryan returned from his sabbatical. He's back with us here. Ryan, how you doing today?
Yeah, better until Elgato started to come in and act up, but can't win them all. There's always technical nightmares. Anything that can go wrong will go wrong is the first thing I learned when I studied media at uni, so good to know that's still a thing.
And we've still got Sam here, of course, back another week. Sam, how are you feeling today?
Feeling good. The results from the last week or so have been very interesting. So pretty excited to get into the nitty gritty of it.
Well, we're going to. Here's our segment, Run It Back, where we talk about the last week in news. And there really has been some interesting news this week as teams are figuring some things out. First topic up, a little bit of a disturbing trend here. We're hitting the 1-year anniversary of the release of the Valorant beta, which is very exciting and cool. The esport has come a long way in the last calendar year. But just recently in the NA scene, we've seen a little bit of disturbing news. 2 organizations have dropped their teams. Dignitas dropped their male Valorant roster. They're still keeping the female roster, but they have dropped one of their main teams. And Space Station dropped their team as well. Should we be concerned? Is this something that we should be worried about? Is this a trend? Is it just these 2 teams kind of stunk? What do we think of it? Sam, why don't you start us out here?
this really comes down to, we spoke about this a lot much earlier on in Valorant's lifespan. We were like, where are the orgs? Why are they not picking up teams? Particularly in reference to like what was going on in Europe, because Europe is still, orgs are like only now kind of stepping into and finding teams. And there was a little bit of criticism like, well, why are they waiting so long? The esport is booming. And I think that the ridiculous results that we've been seeing kind of prove why a lot of organizations waited so long to pick up a team. A prime example is Fnatic. Okay, they haven't dropped their team, thank God for that. But we had Summon FC who came out of nowhere, took second place in First Strike. Yeah, we'll get
getting
there.
ahead of yourself here. That's another bullet point, Sam. You're overlapping the bullet point. All right,
let me get through my actual point. Yeah, so they breeze through First Strike. They take second place. Fnatic signs them. What happened? They didn't make the first Masters, and we've got into the first challenges of the second leg, and they haven't made it into the closed qualifier. So, and that was an organization that waited pretty damn long to pick up a team, whereas a team like Space Station, or an org like Space Station, they've actually gone through quite a few iterations of that roster before finally deciding, all right, doesn't matter what we try, we're not actually getting anywhere, time to back out. And it's sad to see, but I think that some organizations really did jump the gun.
Ryan, what do you make of it?
So I think they dropped their teams for different reasons. I think SSG basically said we'd like to come in again with a new team at some point. Wasn't quite the same feeling with Dignitas. And I think when you look at the top 10 teams, currently Dignitas has been flirting with it, but this is also a team that picked up Poised and Shanks in the early days. They looked really good with those players. Obviously, for reasons, they have been dropped. And ever since, Dig have tried to put together a team with a revolving door of players coming in. So I feel that this is them going, we can't realistically make much of the given situation without, spending a lot of time trying to find good players, spending a lot of money to get these players. And with how good the game changer stuff has been in with the women's team, you kind of go, it's probably better for us to be involved in that, the men's space, if you could call it that. The main sort of portion of Masters 1 and stuff is way too competitive, and there's way too much money being thrown around at the moment. So they're going to take a step back, see how things are in the future. Bear in mind as well, we could go to a franchise league, in which case all of this money spent on teams might amount to nothing if they're not one of those teams that are invited into the franchise.
It's very true. I also feel like I am kind of curious about what the budget was for Dignitas relative to other top teams, because at the time that they signed that homeless roster, they were a hot commodity, right? They were like the big unsigned team. They'd been competing, they'd been winning things, they'd been placing high. Then they signed them, and pretty much immediately after the Shanks and Poise move came through, they kind of just stunk for a while and faded into irrelevance. Yeah. So it's like, what's your budget? What are you paying these guys to get absolutely no results? And at some point, you got to pull the plug. So we'll see if it continues to be a trend. We'll see if more names start coming forward, dropping out of the scene, but we'll find out. We'll find out. Chet, next one. Chet, coach of NRG Valorant, is stepping down from the team. It was his decision, it seems. Seems like he made that choice about a week ago. He's exploring options in Valorant and in CS. I, for one, would just love to see the same team compete in 2 consecutive events for this NRG roster. If we could have that, that would be nice. They can't do anything without having a change, right? Like it feels like every time we see this team, it's a different team. What's going on here with NRG? What do we think, Ryan?
So the main thing, I suppose, is this that felt like mutual decisions, and Daps and Chet came in together to sort of put together this NRG team. But let's be honest, it feels that we've been talking about the roster moves for NRG every week because they literally make changes so often. It's super frustrating to watch when you look at some of the great players that have had under their roster at any given time. And even the roster that they have currently looks insane on paper. It feels like the Manchester City of Valorant is how I described it before, where they're spending insane money having players on short-term contracts and buying out players full on to try and put together the best thing that they can do. This feels like maybe Chet doesn't agree with the way that NRG have been going about things, whether that's player ran, whether that's the managerial side. But unlike Dignitas and SSG, NRG have never been afraid to sort of spend a lot of money to get a tier 1 team. And I think that's one of the main things when you talk to, I forgot, Andy Miller, isn't it, from NRG? Mm-hmm. He was always like, when we get involved, if we get involved in Valorant, we want to do it justice. We want to really treat this properly. And so there was a bit of trepidation early on. Now they're more than willing to throw out players, bring in new ones, and spend a lot of money. Maybe Chet wants something a little bit more consistent. I think we all want something that's a bit more consistent with NRG, because Christ, it's just constant changes.
It really is. Sam, what do you think of this roster, or of just the general decision?
I think that a big issue is picking up a good new player does not equal instant success. You have to actually work and start building up some sort of synergy or whatever. I mean, we had Tens join Sentinels. They had an explosive run. They won Masters. Now where are they? They haven't made it to the second closed qualifier. They got knocked out by Built by Gamers. I mean, just bringing in a powerhouse team and then expecting it to just be amazing right off the bat. Yeah, sure, you may start off with some relatively good results, but you need consistency. And that is the exact thing that NRG just has not had. And we talk time and time again, 50% of what we talk about NRG is this is their roster change, and 50% is, well, they've looked really lackluster for quite a few months now, so this is probably well needed. But if you keep doing it over and over again, you're not going to get any sort of synergy and consistency. You're not going to get the results you want.
You just can't help yourself from getting ahead in our outline
Nah.
today. You're just jumping bullet points ahead all the way down to the thing.
Well, this is good examples.
Yeah. All right. So I honestly think Chet's probably going to go back to Counter-Strike. That's my instinct here, since he pointed out that he was open to Counter-Strike and Valorant offers, is that he's having a little bit of movers remorse and going, maybe things were better back then. I don't know. We'll see. That's my gut for what's going to happen.
He gave it a try. It might not be for him. I mean, I think that's more than okay to admit. I think because Counter-Strike could always do with more coaches, especially after some of them have been banned for a year or two. That maybe he sorted it, got some good experience here and wants to go back. Not wrong with that. Absolutely not wrong with that.
You hurt me when you say these things. But I mean, that's also just the reality of the fact that we're becoming a more mature game here in the Valorant space. It's a year on, but there are a lot of people who are getting into Valorant because it's kind of like the great unknown, the Wild West. Let's see what's going to happen here. And now that it's a little more established, people know what they're getting into a bit more. It's a more informed decision, I suppose. Now we'll get into our next bullet point, which this is our big clickbait thing. Fnatic making big changes. They benched 2 players, Sak and Mo. There's rumors about who they're trialing. This is the thing where our clickbait title came in for anyone who's been waiting in chat for this long to figure out what's going on. Apparently, they're trialing OLOFMEISTER, according to a report from a Polish publication, and that was, I think, confirmed as well by Nell. So OLOFMEISTER may be making the move over to Valorant, coming back to Fnatic, his historically successful org. This Fnatic team, they picked up Summon FC and then they immediately started tearing them apart. Well, not immediately. They let them run for a bit. Then they started tearing them apart. Do we think they needed more time? Do we think that they've just underperformed? Fnatic obviously wants to be on top and they haven't been on top. What do we make of it, Ryan?
So I think with Europe overall, a lot of the teams have been very consistent in a good way of updating and making sure that their teams can, consistently improve with roster changes, even though they might not need it. You look at stuff like G2, you look at Vitality that dropped a couple of players and brought in some new ones. FPX is probably the main one, right? On Rubino coming into Heretics as the 6th player. There's a lot of teams that are kind of like, yeah, we're tier 1 in Europe, but we want to make sure that we're the best team in the world, right? So I do think that this is a fair move. I don't think Chat was really at the same level as other Sentinel players, if I'm being honest. You can't take anything away from how Summon FC had played in First Strike, but all of the other teams around them have improved a dramatic amount. And this is Fnatic. It's one of the biggest orgs in the world when it comes to how well known it is. So you can't realistically just sort of rest on your laurels and sit there with it. So I don't think it's going to be OLOFMEISTER, to be honest. It sounded like from Nell's perspective, who has been sort of talking about these reports, that he still needs time to consider it. The same as Alex as well, ex-Vitality and C9 player. Similar sort of thing where they want to weigh up their options and then maybe move to Valorant, but not quite sit on it just yet.
Yeah, Ryan touches on a good point there about all the other teams have been slowly but steadily improving. We saw the same kind of trend in North America. We've been saying for a while, Sentinels have got to watch their backs because all the other teams are coming up. We've seen it with TSM, who also seem to just kind of rest. I don't think TSM have made a single roster change. And they're like sometimes it's got to happen. Fnatic don't want to be the next TSM, I guess. So they're starting to make those roster changes. It is unfortunate for those players because I think when you get through a first strike run and you take down FPX, you manage to snag that second place spot, you kind of have a lot of confidence and a lot of feel good. But if you can't maintain that momentum and if other teams are improving at a rate that's faster than you are, change has got to happen. It sucks, but it is what it is.
It's been a while since First Strike. Time to get some results. Time to get something to show for it. I will just touch on the Olaf thing again, which is that if he does come over, that's such a legendary name. It's been a little while since his heyday in Counter-Strike, but this was a guy who was the best player in any server he joined up into for a year at least, and realistically more. The fabled strategy of Olaf go kill was a classic in the Fnatic strat book. I mean, he's a legendary name. It'd be a huge name making the move over. So that's definitely one to keep an eye on, even if it's not to Fnatic. If he's considering it and offers are coming through, I think any EU team's going to be interested in acquiring it if that becomes a possibility.
Definitely.
Now let's talk about what the hell's going on with LDM. LDM, I'm going to try my best to do a little summary here, but it's a developing situation, and it's a lot of, he said, they said, blah, 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 trying to figure out what's actually happening with this. Basically, LDM won Masters for the Latin American North region, LAN. They won the damn Masters event, and then immediately afterwards, the team exploded. Because apparently one of the co-owners or chief investors, it's unclear whether he actually owned the team because apparently nothing was signed. A guy named Ezio just vaporized, disappeared, didn't pay any debts, wasn't paying salaries, wasn't paying out deals towards contracted players. Like, it just wasn't paying anything and vanished. So it seems like he was a scammer. Now apparently someone's saying he's in a life-threatening accident or something. He's gone off the map. The other owner is saying, well, we're trying to figure out the situation and figure out how we can pay people, but I didn't realize what was going on. It seems like the org was basically split between Latin America North, Latin America South, and so he's trying to figure out, saying they're free agents, the coaches are free agents, they're looking for a new org, they're looking to get paid, they're looking to get their money. It's madness
somewhere to live
going on here. It's an absolute disgrace and a huge bummer for a team that just won Masters. I don't even know how to make heads or tails of this. Do either of you have any insight on what's going on with the situation?
I can't say that I know a hell of a lot about what goes on in LATAM. But I will say that it's not the first crazy story I've heard about an org coming out of the Latin American region. Not necessarily in Valorant and other games as well. But, I've heard weird stuff coming from that region before. And it's just really, really sad that in a smaller region, you find so many more people trying to take advantage of players and try to take advantage of teams and see what they can get out of it. I mean, this team, if you go and you read the whole long spiel, but they were in a gaming house. They're now no longer in the gaming house. They're now holed up in the one player's house. Mm-hmm. And they don't have PCs because I think sponsor isn't the right word. Maybe there's a mistranslation there because this is generally not how sponsorships work. But the PCs were sponsored and then something wasn't paid. So they took the PCs back. So now the team cannot play in the next challenges because they don't have a place to live and they don't have computers. Whoever this person is, I am flabbergasted that someone can do this to 5+ other human beings. And it sounded like this dude had a lot of debt of his own because there were debt collectors coming around and asking for money and he wasn't paying that either. So it almost starts to sound like a Ponzi scheme where he was gonna steal the master's money to pay off his debts. I don't know. Obviously, I don't actually know the full details. I only know what's in that Reddit thread, but it's dodgy as hell.
It really does seem like a catch me if you can type of situation where this guy was running multiple schemes and scams and it all kind of caught up with him at once and vaporized. Ryan, what do you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame really because LDM were looking to be the best team in Latin America, to be honest, and were one of the main front runners, I suppose, of qualifying for Reykjavik from that region, right? So from watching that region a little bit in Masters, this was the standout team. And there's, pretty good rosters in that scene, maybe not in comparison to other parts of the world, but this is the team that won the whole event, right? So that's a full thing. Typically, from what I know, when it comes to North and South Latin America, North is considered better. Don't hate on me. Don't shoot the messenger. That's all I've heard. So it just really is a shame when they could have got onto the main worldwide stage, I suppose, to get a lot more eyes on them and a lot more fans, that something like this has happened at the worst opportunity. Like, they're not in the qualifiers, they're not playing anymore. And so we're not going to see them on that worldwide stage, which we maybe should have done based on the players' talents.
Yeah, I think there's two, to my eyes, there's two huge questions here. Obviously, this SEO guy, something is not right there. That's problematic. Hopefully they can pursue and figure out what they're owed and whatnot. But there's two chief issues. Issue one is, where's the prize money gone or going? Mm-hmm. Has it been paid out already? Who was in control of it? If it was paid out to this SEO guy, is there any way to recoup it? Can they get it to the players? And that I think the onus becomes on whoever's organizing Riot or the TO. Whoever's paying out the fee needs to try and track that down and make sure it actually goes to the right place, which is the players. Second issue is, any orgs with interest in the region, here's your chance. You can pick up a team. You could be the absolute hero. You can sign this roster, get them into a situation where they can compete without being worried about putting a roof over their heads or having PCs to play. I'd assume they're not going to demand a ton in salaries since you're bailing them out of a really rough situation, and you get a team that has a very good chance at making the Reykjavik Major.
Also, shout out to
sign them.
Shout out to Hiko and Frost for, I think they're putting together a bit of a fundraiser for them to sort of get them out of this situation.
Just thinking about that.
So, shout out to them. Obviously, it's early days. They're still planning it, but, it would be sort of cool to support that because, again, this is a team of players that have absolutely done nothing wrong. And much like a lot of teams currently in the world when it comes to Valorant that have been screwed over by orgs disappearing and going silent, I'm curious to see if Riot does anything. It's kind of out of their territory, and you can't really blame them for anything that's happening. Yeah. But considering it's happened to so many pretty impactful teams, certainly in North America, I am curious to see if Riot can do anything about this realistically, never mind if they should.
The issue is if the money's already been paid out, right? I mean, what they can do is they can ban this SEO guy from participating in Riot esports in general, but he's gone already. He's in the wind. I don't know how much good that's going to do. It is a tough situation all around. We are going to move on. Hopefully it gets resolved in some way that's satisfactory to the LDM players. Please, somebody sign them, give them a chance. Clearly they're talented players. Clearly they've got a shot at competition. Just make it happen. It should be an obvious, like, you're going to get good PR. You're going to get good players. Sign them. Somebody help these guys out. Yeah. We are going to start talking about the Challengers quals that did happen. We'll start out in NA, but don't worry, Sam. We will devote enough time to EU because obviously there's more to talk about since the EU games are literally ongoing right now. I think the Heretics game just wrapped up with Heretics getting eliminated by the Opportunists. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's exciting. NA Challengers, though, let's talk about this. Only 4 out of 8 Masters teams made it through. The qualified teams are Xset, BBG, Envy, Andbox, Version 1, Immortals, Cloud9 Blue, and 100 Thieves. Wow. Top 3 teams from the last Masters event did not make it through this qualifier. What do we think? There's a debate going on right now whether the calendar makes consistency difficult. Shazam was talking about teams anti-stratting, not having a chance to reform your roster. Like, there's a lot potentially up in the air here. What do we think about that, Ryan?
Well, I mean, considering the stuff that's happening in Europe, there's a lot more credibility to it because originally, it was Tanny from Heretics that said 7 out of the 8 teams in Europe that made Masters made this first round of Challengers for stage 2. The only team that didn't make it was Ballista, who I still am like, maybe they didn't deserve to be there in comparison to some of the other teams. Vitality have improved a lot as well, which took their spot, and it's a pretty well-known organization with great players. There's a lot more consistency there. However, first and second place have been knocked out of the tournament so far with Ascend and Heretics going down. He's not wrong, and I think it's one of those areas, certainly when you look at the fact that a new agent has come in. That's the only major change between Masters 1 and this stage so far. And we have Viper and Eurobuffs on the way with Bucky changes, right? So there isn't too much to work with when it comes to reinventing yourself. That's the main argument that Shazam had, which you can disagree with because you look over to Europe, a lot more of these teams that were in Masters 1 playing Astra, playing a little bit more Viper, changing up their comps quite dramatically. But I do feel for him when it's like, it's a constant barrage of games in this calendar year. And I think that's going to be quite damaging in the future. We saw the effects of that in Counter-Strike. Certainly could happen here with Valorant.
A 1 month break is just, or rather a 1 week break is just
to
not
say,
enough.
A month would be great.
A month would be amazing. I think all of the teams would be super happy with that. Like, nerfs and buffs to an agent are one thing, but an entirely new agent dropping where every single other team that didn't make it to Masters has had like 3 to 4 weeks to practice that agent, and you have a week. You may have played the agent in your comp games, but that's not the same thing. You need to scrim it, you need to practice it, you need to theory craft it. And of course, the coaches, you might say, well, the coaches could have been thinking about it. Well, the coaches were focusing on how they were going to perform at Masters, which was way more important in that particular time and space. Now, it is really exciting to see that a lot of teams have started using the Astra despite not having a massive amount of time to start learning the agent, to start implementing strategies and so on. We are actually seeing them at least attempt it, trying to get something done there, which is good, but it does give you a little bit of a drawback. I mean, yes, you can make the point that a lot of the EU Masters teams made it into this first Challenger closed qualifier, but like Ryan said, 2 of the top teams have already been knocked out from Masters. So we're likely going to be seeing more teams start to climb the ladder as the Masters teams from the previous circuit or whatever try to play catch up. They've got the individual mechanical skill, but in terms of what strategies they're implementing and how they're going to be playing on the server in those matches, they're playing catch up, and it's not a really great position to be in.
I also think here's another point in favor of having a little bit more breathing room in the calendar, because I've spoken about this before, where just based on the current pace of events, there is no space between Riot events. So you're not really having any third-party TOs getting involved, so on and so forth. But also, if you win a Masters event, you should be able to tell your players, all right, you get 4 days off, like just take some time off. You just won the biggest event so far, and you have to immediately start prepping for the next qualifier. It is suffocating. It's just it's gonna lead to burnout at some point, and it just really does make it difficult to have consistency. It's just an extra week in there, man. I think I get it for this cycle, because the reality is Riot's trying to put together their first Valorant LAN. They had these dates for Reykjavik, so that condenses everything, where they're like, all right, we got to do it by now. We've set up, we got to run 3 Challengers events before this happens for every region. Like, they have to happen. I'm hoping that that's a limitation of this specific circumstance, where they knew they had this window of time to make a LAN happen. But I also don't like this new Challengers format, if that makes sense. In the previous Challengers cycle, Challengers 1 was kind of its own thing. So let's say you're Sentinels and you just won Masters. If you were coming into that previous Challenger cycle where Challengers 1 doesn't really qualify you to anything else, you could just take it off and feel okay with that. But the problem is there's only 8 slots in the Challengers finals. 4 of them are going to come from this Challengers 1 event. 4 more slots in the next Challengers 2 event come from this Challengers 1 event. You can't afford to take off. It's too huge an opportunity. And if you miss out here, like 3 of the top teams did, there's just not that much more of an opportunity to make it through. It's brutal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I that's the main thing I was going to say. It feels that as much as I'm excited for Reykjavik, I do feel that this Valorant event has been shoehorned onto the back end of MSI, because that's the main reason why they're doing it, right? Because the majority of May is for MSI, the League of Legends event, and then the last week of May is for this Valorant event. Whilst they've got stuff set up, it can be easily translated. And it's a super good idea, but I think there's been like a week taken off the break, for example. There might have been 2 weeks that pro teams got off instead of just the 1. And like you mentioned, 1 less Challengers stage. You got the Challengers finals, which you also have to include. I think literally for Europe, after this closed qualifier bit ends for Europe, which is on Friday, Saturday, open qualifiers start again. There's just no break. So it really is difficult for a lot of these teams, but I do think that's just more because of the situation that we're specifically in, and not the whole calendar is going to be this laid out. At least I hope not, because I mean, watching the games, I'm burning out. That's why it's up the break in the first place, right? So it's tough to follow it all.
And to kind of come back to an old faithful rant, of course, NA, at least in the closed qualifier, have double elimination.
Yeah.
EU does not. Surprise, surprise, single elim. So if you've made it to the closed qualifiers, you're still on a knife's edge in every single match. Heretics just lost to opportunists. They don't get a second chance. That's it. Come back in challenges 2. And there's no comeback in challenges 3 because there is no challenges 3. So good luck, have fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a terrible, terrible change.
I will say one positive note. I am happy with some of the teams that have qualified here. Obviously, it's the format notwithstanding. It's cool to see Cloud9 Blue back in form. It's cool to see version 1 starting to get there. I thought they might have gotten there in the last one. This time they make it through. Andbox coming back into it. BBG playing well. Some of these teams are very encouraging to see back in the fray, back in the move. But we're going to move on, talk about EU here, because I know Sam is just ready to do it, ready to talk about EU. We'll talk about the qualifier quickly because obviously the closed qualifier is already happening. So we're going to keep moving here. Ascend, Opportunists, FPX, Alliance, Vitality, Guild, NIP, Heretics. They all make it through. It's 7 out of 8 of the Masters teams, as we talked about. Vitality, the only new one. But teams are already getting eliminated. We'll talk about that in a minute. What I want to ask about this qualifier is, it's part of what we already touched on with Fnatic. But at this point, Liquid, Fnatic, G2, and in particular talking about G2 and Fnatic, 2 heavy-hitting orgs. G2, the team that dominated the scene for so long, and we're talking all this shit about, no one can even touch us for so long. They haven't done anything in a while. They haven't qualified to anything in a while. This is starting to get really brutal. Are they just distinctly an afterthought here? Are they just wildly out of the top? Is there a path back in? What do these orgs even do at this point?
Right. You didn't name that at anybody, so.
Sam, take it. You spoke first. You stepped into my trap.
Okay, so you've activated my trap card.
Trap
so
hole.
We spoke a little bit about how TSM have never made any roster changes since the dawn of time.
Well, they've got Brax
G2
now.
Well, okay, now finally we're starting to, and it didn't do. We'll get to that. Before you yell at me. So G2 were in a similar position, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, I saw a tweet where they said that Zeke was going to be on the bench or taking a break or something. They were going to have somebody else playing something. I would have to go and find that tweet, but it looks like something is at least happening in G2, and much like with TSM, it's about damn time. They've spent so long relying on the mechanical skill of these players, and this is something we've been saying since the beta tournaments, where they had these amazing mechanically skilled players, and how it started out was very puggy, very we're just going to rely solely on our ability as individual players. And then after that, they started to play like a team. It took some time, and a lot of people were still looking at them and saying, well, they're still really puggy. People should be beating them, but they just weren't, because that mechanical skill was just too good. And then as they continued to strategize and get smarter in their plays, they became really, really terrifying until First Strike. And I don't know if it's an ego hit or just, again, that whole thing of teams have been slowly but surely catching up. But G2 have fallen off the map. They are not the team that they once were. And much like changes have been needed and been happening consistently over in NA, it feels like a lot of teams in EU have been pushing back and resisting making those changes. Well, you can only resist for so long. So I'm glad to see that something does seem to be giving for G2. Hopefully it makes some kind of an impact. But as of right now, they're completely off the map.
Ryan?
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to really have a look at what's going wrong for G2, Fnatic, and Liquid when the games aren't streamed. I don't want to get into this too much because I don't want to burn any bridges, but I will say that Freaks and Riot have been very good for Europe, at least, to be able to listen to a lot of the feedback and to respond off of it. To be fair, it was changing best of ones to best of threes, which realistically, we shouldn't have to argue for that. That seems obvious. It's why not play a Valorant game in Valorant and not Call of Duty? Hey, that's a great idea. It's just, we shouldn't be having to argue obvious stuff. But I hope that they see all of the feedback that they got on Reddit about those certain things. We want to watch these teams. Hell, even Pansy was offering to stream it herself. I think it was the Guild versus, it might have been G2. I can't remember who it was off the top of my head. But she was I want to broadcast these games, please. So I hope that they take that feedback on board and we see that happening in the future. But, as as somebody that tries to be like somebody that's well vested in the European scene, when it comes to what's going on with G2, what's going on Fnatic, my expert analysis is I haven't the foggiest. I haven't got a bloody clue because nobody's streaming the games and it's really starting to irritate me. So hopefully that changes in the future.
I will say, I think your point about linking them to TSM was a good one, Sam, where I think that when I think about those teams, I don't even think it's necessarily that they've had a huge drop off. I think it's that they've stayed where they were and the general level has just risen beyond them. It's sort of like, you know, they were standing on the beach at low tide and they were outside of the water and then they didn't move. And now the water's up to their chin and they're going, that's strange. I haven't moved. Why is the water higher? Like it just feels that way where they have not moved. They have not caught up. They haven't been advancing their own form. And the level they were at isn't good enough anymore. Valorant is such a young game, just hit our year mark of the beta. The level's just going to keep getting better. And as more agents get integrated, it just keeps changing and shifting. This is a very living game. It's gonna move, it's gonna change. You gotta be on top of it, otherwise you're gonna be left behind and be an afterthought. Doesn't matter how expensive your roster is, doesn't matter how big the names are, you'll be left as an afterthought. That's the reality here. So let's talk about the EU challenges that's been happening. We've now got a few results to talk about. Again, this is a changing situation right now. I think FBX Vitality just kicked off, so we're not really gonna be able to talk about that matchup, but
ask me about my team. Ask me about my team. Go ahead.
I'll ask you about your team. Go. Guild one something. They beat Alliance again.
Impressed.
Hell yeah. Mitch was billing it as they're out to get revenge. Alliance is going to come for their throats. He's going to get the revenge. Didn't happen. Talk to us, Sam.
Oh, I'm so excited by these results, particularly Guild. And like for those that pay attention to like the opening video, there's a part where Mike says to me, "Defend your team, Sam." And that's specifically about Guild, because back when they were bonk, I was like standing them like you wouldn't believe, and they just were not getting results. And then lo and behold, Masters comes along. They didn't manage to get all the way up to like the grand final, but they did exceptionally well for themselves, and that streak continues. As you see here, they're in the semifinals of the closed qualifier, beating out Alliance yet again. Alliance, another team. I actually wrote about this, comparing the two teams. Guild, a team that had been together for quite some time and had been building that synergy and trying to improve, versus Alliance, a team who had come together relatively new and you know, as a 5-man roster, and had just kind of blown through the competition. And it becomes that head to head of like experience as a team versus just raw skill, I suppose, individual skill, and how that meshes together and it bumps into each other. And then, well, this time around, experience won out. I am so excited about Guild. That's what I have to say about EU.
All right, Ryan, talk to me about, I mean, Ascend. Look, they won Masters. They're out in the first round here. NIP beat them 2-1 series. It was a really fun series. I actually got to catch that one live. It was really quite enjoyable to watch. Ryan, what do you make of that?
I think the main thing is that people should be not writing off Ninjas in Pajamas as much. Like even in Masters 1, the only team to beat Ascend in the main part of that tournament was NIP. Ascend just came back to beat them even harder 2-0, then beat FPX, then beat Heretics in the final. So I do think that a lot of people kind of slipped on Ninjas in Pajamas a little bit. And I think this is a bit of a weird backhanded compliment, but a lot of the mistakes that Ninjas in Pajamas make are just glaringly obvious. Falling on the sword, I think, is how Pansy put it. Like they just do a lot of stupid stuff and get punished for it, as they should do. But this doesn't feel like a G2 team or Fnatic where the problem is much deeper than that. When you watch it, you kind of go, if they don't do X, then they're going to win. And I think that was the case certainly for the last two maps of the series, especially on Icebox, where they were up 11-1 at halftime. Almost lost because it was like 13-10 the final score, but a lot of that was down to NIP just making these mistakes. So I think that NIP versus Guild is going to be a really good game. I think they both suffer from the same thing. Really good players. When they're on an on day, they look so good, but they're very prone to making big mistakes. Guild, they can get ninja defused. They can just do some really odd stuff. So it's a good game for either team to show that they're still capable of being the best team in Europe, and they would qualify for the EMEA finals for winning that too. So I'm really glad that both these teams are in it. For being some of the oldest rosters in Europe, I'm super glad that they're still winning out against other teams like Ascend to show that we should still be talking about them.
Yeah, and I think speaking to your point about NIP having very fixable mistakes, I'm going to talk about the man who's leading the party there. He goes by Akukos now, which threw me for a good long while trying to figure out who Akukos was. It's existence. He's now Akukos. Name change coming in, fresh start, yada, yada, yada. Really confusing for me, I'll be completely honest. But they put emphasis on the IGL. They put emphasis on the leadership side of things. They put emphasis on bringing in analysts. I think they just announced a new analyst as well coming in. So they're building out that side of things. And that's what allows you to fix these mistakes and stay on top of things and keep improving as a team. So it's good to see the NIP approach. It's interesting, too, because they were a team where when the first wave of big announcements in Europe came in, that team immediately kind of started disappointing. And now it feels like they finally figured out the formula. They figured out the tool. They're competing at the top and they're consistently getting better. So that is exciting to see. On the other side, we have a fresh result, which is the other finalist from Masters has been eliminated. The Opportunists, who are soon to become BDS, if reports are true, beat Heretics 2-1. What do we make of that one? Heretics out in the first round as well. That's kind of spicy. Ryan, you want to start us here?
Yeah, I didn't catch the game because we were prepping for this, but it is nice again to see Opportunists staying together after being dropped by Defuse. The coach was saying that they're playing out of their new org's space, so they're actually at boot camping at the moment, which is a huge help. So, you know, shout out if it is BDS. We're assuming so because it would connect a lot of the dots. BDS is a super cool organization. To quickly get them set up, to have them prepared for this tournament, and it's benefited them a lot. Nobody's left the team. They've brought nobody else in. They just know that the 5 players that they have are incredibly good and should continue with them. What a great first result when you're on a broadcast like this. And then, oh, by the way, we're now signed to BDS. If they could do that going into the EMEA finals, that would be huge, but they'd have FPX of Vitality to play afterwards.
Now, Sam, I know you talked about this. They beat Heretics on Haven. It was a 27-1 record, their first defeat. How crazy is that?
It's ridiculous. I still remember, so I got to catch a little bit of the first map, which was Split, which was the map that Heretics won. But before the map started, Mitch and Tom and Yinsu, they were all talking about how they suspect that Split would be Opportunists map, and then Haven, which Heretics had never lost, 27-0 streak. Surely that's the map that they take. But they also kind of drew on some other parallels. You know, there was a point where Heretics had never lost a best of 3 until they did. And there was a point where they'd never lost a best of 5 until they did. And so they'd never lost Haven. Well, today they have. Yeah. And I think this is a really great result, particularly for Opportunists, because having just been picked up by an org, like this is kind of the reverse of what we saw with Monkey Business, where Monkey Business performed in the Red Bull home ground and they just did not perform. And there were all these rumors going around like, oh, they haven't been announced because OGs decided to drop them because they played badly, you know? Like, you don't want that kind of publicity just before you get announced. So for Opportunists, this is fantastic because even if they don't make it to the grand final, even if they don't win the whole thing, to have made it all the way to the semifinals, and then you get to come out and you go, we made semifinals. Oh, by the way, this is our new org. Way. It's just really, really, really cool, like feather in your cap. So really happy to see that they're performing here.
My only question is, if we're already at the point where they're boot camping at the org's location, why don't they just announce them? I don't get it. You're missing all this.
They're going to do it after Challengers 1. I don't know why, but that's the plan at least. So if they can go in with a huge amount of momentum, being we're announced as a team of the top 8 in all of Europe, it's going to be super interesting. It's worth adding as well, when it comes to consistency, when it comes to the other regions as well, CIS, Gambit, who won Masters 1 and went through all of Challengers without dropping a map, lost against Crow Crowd. So that every region is having inconsistency issues. And so Shazam might have a really good point.
I think he does. I think he really does. I mean, you think about it with Gambit, they've put so many maps on the record. They didn't drop a map, but now every other team in the region is anti-stratting them. Because if you want to win the tournament, you know that's the team you have to beat at some point. So you're absolutely doing your homework to anti-strat them. And that's the thing. If you're the best, everyone's going to pay attention to you. If you're the best and then you don't have any downtime between the events to change something, everybody's going to know exactly what you're doing. Because it's not like you held anything back in Masters, right? You showed everything you had. It was the biggest tournament to date, and you haven't had a chance to develop the strat book from then. So it's just a tough position. All right. Our last topic before we wrap up today's shows, we're going to talk about NA Challengers. We're not going to get too deep into it. Obviously, this starts tomorrow. tomorrow afternoon. The games begin. You'll want to tune in for that one. It's going to be here on the Nerd Street channel. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm happy to reveal we're going to be doing a Press 4 pre-show for Thursday's day of broadcast, and also on Saturday as well. When we get that figured out. So be sure to tune in early to check out the Press 4 pre-show. We usually run those about 20, 25-ish minutes. Give you a little bit of a taste, get you into the action, give you a little analysis before the main broadcast starts. This should be fun. Looks like a lot of fun. Bunch of new teams in it who didn't get a chance in the last Masters go around. Bunch of returning teams. I'm just going to ask right off the bat, who you got?
I mean, it's so
100
open.
Thieves, Immortals, Exit, version 1.
Repeat that for me one more time.
100 Thieves, Immortals, Exit, version 1.
Okay, so 3 of the previous Masters teams and version 1. You're leaving off
No
Envy. I
context.
feel like that's bold. I like it a lot. Talk to me about it. Do you have any justification, or you just going to throw it out there?
I'm just throwing it out there. I'm going to talk about it on the pre-show. If y'all
I
want to
like
know
it.
why I'm making a hot take, you come to the pre-show.
Be sure to tune into the pre-show, see if her change or if prediction changed by then. We're literally recording it after this show. I'm kind of amused to see if that happens, but I like it. I like the bold prediction. Ryan, you got one?
I think so. Cloud9, Immortals, NVX set.
Okay.
Ooh.
We're swapping one of the Masters teams, and we're swapping the new team that makes it through. I like this prediction as well. It's making things very interesting. I'm going to say, I think version 1 make it through. I feel like this is my really bold take that I'm just going to throw out there right now. I have this gut feeling that Xset win it. Like, come first. I just have this gut feeling that it's time for Xset to win an event. It just feel it deep in my plums. Then I'm going to go Envy. And last one, you know what? Between Immortals and Cloud9, I think I'm going to give it to Immortals, but I'm close on that one. So I'm saying version 1, Xset winning it, Envy, and then Immortals, but maybe Cloud9. I'll give myself a little bit of an asterisk on that one. Either way, we are going to record our Press 4 pre-show in just a moment after this one. Thank you so much for everyone tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to tune in every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when we air this broadcast, or I guess it's EDT now. Whatever, East Coast time zone, 1 p.m. Be sure to tune in for the Press 4 to Defuse show. We have so much fun bringing you all the Valorant news in the week. If you enjoyed the show as well, please follow our @ down below our faces. Follow Ryan and Sam. Be sure to do so. They bring you all the good Valorant tweets. We'll see you next time. Tune in for the pre-show. Watch challenges. It's going to be a lot of fun. See ya.